everybody, good morning. This is Jean here from Truelove Quilts for You. I'm working on my bookcase quilt, but for now I'm just going to deviate a little bit because I've come to the part where I want to choose a backing for my quilt. And this is just slightly off topic from my bookcase quilt. I'm choosing a backing, and what I'm talking about today is about recycling. Again, just slightly off topic from a tutorial, but just a little tip or some things that I like to do. In this country, in America, we have yard sales, garage sales, flea markets, jumble sales, even inexpensive things off of eBay. We have thrift stores, antique stores, antique malls, maybe in other countries. When I lived in England, it was a car boot sale or jumble sale or charity shops. What I'm talking about is you can find some really good deals and some things that might just go by the wayside because you're thinking, well, I have not a clue what to do with that. And what I'm talking about is unfinished quilts. We all know the sad story, if you are quilters, that great auntie or your nana, your grandmom passed away, and their kids or their family, because of circumstances, really don't have a clue what to do with her beloved quilting things. So they try to get family members to take what they can, but in the end they might, box it all up and give it to a charity shop or a Goodwill or a thrift store. And not really realizing, maybe not of monetary value, but of sentimental value. I've picked up quite a few over the years, quite a few unfinished quilt tops. And then I want to show you this one that I had picked up a while ago from this was a yard sale. This one was a yard sale. And I tried to ask, it was a gentleman in the yard sale, he didn't have a clue. He had been compiling stuff from the neighborhood, and it was in a box for $2. Now, this unfinished quilt top here, if I can unfurl it, I've washed it. I believe the fabrics are probably, let me see if I can shush it out here, are probably from maybe the late 50s up until the 70s maybe. I'm not sure. It could be earlier. It could be earlier. This is the quilt top. It's hard to determine the age of fabrics. You can say, oh, that's an old quilt. Well, an old quilt could deem it in the 70s or in the 30s. So I'm not quite sure. I was looking at this quilt top, trying to gauge the construction of it. Now, you have to understand, this quilt top was pieced by hand. That I can determine. It is not a machined seam. All of these blocks set, and this is a setting called Around the World, Trip Around the World. It's not a true trip around the world. Well, it's this wonderful woman's variation of. Usually a trip around the world has a center point and then the same fabric going around and around, probably set like maybe on a diagonal, which this is. This has been hand pieced. Somebody took the pains and effort to cut every single square, and it's beautifully done. It really is awesome. This is our center point, the green with the pink. But I was looking at this. Around the edges, the person obviously had run out of some fabric because oops, look at that. The blocks start to change. Like this one, it goes from purple to the stripe to the green. So whoever had made this quilt top, oh my word. And I found it for $2 and I'm like, are you kidding me? I'm going to rescue it. But what am I going to do with it? Because I got it home and unfortunately I went over it with a fine-tooth comb. Can you see what I'm looking at? Yeah, this is, it's not just a seam. The fabric is gone. The fabric is shredded. This black and white gingham, which I could get a piece. I have black and white gingham right behind me. Do I want to do that? At this point in my life, I don't. I don't want to do that. I don't want to, I'm not a quilt restoration person, a restorer. I'm not a quilt person. This blue and red is actually very thin, coarse fabric. And I was looking at this quilt top, and all the other fabrics are really quite stable, except this fabric here. Interesting about choices of fabric. This one is a little bit thin and a little bit coarse, and it disintegrated over the years. The gingham is fairly strong. The solids, this is like a shirting. It might have been someone's shirt. I'm tending to think that these plaids were perhaps, I like to think, perhaps her husband's shirt. These brown plaids, they look it, don't they? They look like, you know, the old plaid shirts that gentlemen used to wear. And some of these fabrics here in the little, what were called calicos. There's a few stains on here. I've tried to get them out. If I tried a little bit harder, I probably could have, but I wasn't bothered. It's nice and clean, and I pressed it to the best of my, how I wanted to. What am I going to do with this? That's what the point is. I'm going to back a quilt. I'm making a wall hanging, and I'll show you here. I'm making my wall hanging of my bookcase quilt. It's an applique. It's I've just finished gluing down all my bits on my shelves, which if you've been following me, you've seen it. And I was going to look for what I was going to, you know, I went into my fabric stash here, and what am I going to back it with? Well, since it's a wall hanging, and it's not actually going to be seen all that much, I'm going to put a hanging sleeve on the top back of it. I have just a few of these in my possession. I thought I'm going to use that. Now, I obviously, because I'm not going to be bothered about this ripped part here, the body of this quilt, I've measured it, or the quilt itself is much larger than my wall hanging. This is, fortunately for me, that flaw is on the edge. So I can center my wall hanging on the good part of this quilt top and bring it back to not life, because it's not going to be used and cuddled. This is a wall hanging, but just bring it back. And if you do happen to turn it around, you'll see my work on the front, and you'll see an anonymous person on the back. I like that. I like that thought that I rescued something. As you know, as I've said before, I'm a bit of a controlled hoarder. I like things, but, you know, would I necessarily make this into a quilt? I wouldn't. It's very well pieced. It really is, having been done by hand. As you know, again, you know I don't hand sew anything. Oh my word, oh my word. All these pieces, all the thought, all the life, all the pattern. And it probably would hold up, but I would be hesitant to stitch either this in the ditch, you know, on those hand quilting stitches, although it's done very well. I was surprised when I got it home. I thought it was machine pieced. That's how good it is. That's how good. I'm like, oh, you know, that I just went like that. Oh, I'm gonna have it for $2 unless the guy changes his mind. And then I got it home, and I'm like, what? This is hand pieced. All these squares. Anyway, I rescued it. I'm going to be making it. I'm going to square it up. I'm going to center it, I should say. I'm going to center my quilt top on this work of art. I'm pleased that I rescued it. I'm thrilled that I can recycle something. If my quilt is ever taken down, and gingerly, probably won't because it's a wall hanging, but if somebody picks it up and says, oh, turns it around, like, oh my word, Also, I was thinking about, I like the fact of using a quilt, of an unfinished quilt top. This has many, 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 many seams. The more seams you have in a quilt, the sort of the heavier it will be, because you have that much more thread. And it's surprising how much thread can add to the weight of a quilt. It's not going to make it 5 pounds heavier, please, but it's going to make it a little bit heavier. Why I'm saying that is I like using a quilt, an unfinished quilt top for the backing of my quilt, because it is heavier, and that means when I machine quilt it, it will be a heavier quilt, and heavier will lay flatter against my wall. I don't know if that's a science or not. That's according to Jean. Don't take my word for it. Quilt people out there are probably going, what? But that's my thought. That's my thought. So this funky pieces will be cut away. The edges will be cut away. And that's okay. That's okay. I will save them. Maybe make a pillow or something out of the other bits that, around the edges. I won't get rid of the whole thing. I'm paying tribute to some wonderful person. I like to think of who actually did this. Like I say, did they cut up their husband's shirts? Did they cut up their little girls' summer dresses? Or not? Maybe they went to the store and bought stuff. I don't know. But the dreamer in me likes to think that. So anyway, this is my backing for my bookcase quilt. So I'm going to center it. I'm going to give it one more press and size it up, starch it up, to make it nice. And then I'm going to layer it. And this, folks, is going to be, minus the glaring holes, the backing of my quilt. So I guess my point is recycle, reduce, reuse. People have said, oh, can I use a sheet? Of course you can use a sheet. I've never used a sheet because I like my quilting stitches to be hidden, because if I screw up or if my tension's wrong or something, you don't see them on the back of my quilt. Mostly that doesn't happen, but a sheet, like, oh my word, you gotta really be good. So I use patches. I'll piece my backing together in large, like maybe 18-inch pieces. If I don't have enough yardage for one, I'll just cut out big 18-inch pieces with a really large ruler and sew them together. You only need a couple across and a couple down. Or do this, an old Quilts top that you see at a thrift store. And I like to think, I put a lot of energy and effort into my quilt here. My thought, this quilt especially, or this quilt in particular, I should say, because it's my bookshelf quilt. I've been collecting my images for a long time. And I put some thought, some real thought into the placement. It's not a hard quilt, but and I thought, oh, I think that deserves that quilt top. I have a couple other ones, but anyway, you may not love the look. I don't, and I'll be totally honest, because I am, as you know me, I don't love this. I don't love the colorways. It's very, what should I say? It's muted, and it's very, I think, like 70s. And even though I'm a 70s and I'm a 60s and a 70s girl, I don't love the fabric choices, but I love the thought, and I love the quilt top. If that makes any sense whatsoever. I'm sure it will make sense to some of you. And I'm going to use it. I'm going to use it on my treasured quilt here. So anyway, that was just my little tip for the day, or whatever it is for the day. I'm going to be using this as my backing for my bookcase quilt. So stay tuned. I'm working on my quilt. I'm going to be putting a hanging sleeve on, which I'm going to do a tutorial on. And yeah, we'll see how it goes. So folks, reduce, reuse, and recycle. You'll be real proud that you did. All right, have a lovely day, folks. See ya. Bye.